A milestone was reached in 1800 when the world population reached 1 billion people. 100 years later, in the 1900s, the number grew to 1.65 billion. By the 21st century, statistics more than tripled as 6 billion people were recorded by 2000. 20 years later, as of 2020, there are over 7.8 billion on Earth, and this is projected to further increase. But could there really be such a thing as too many people? To put it simply, overpopulation is defined as an undesirable state where there are too many people living in a particular area that its carrying capacity is exceeded. Now, why is overpopulation an issue? When talking about overpopulation, the number of people is not just a problem that we are dealing with. It is also about the quality of life that these people have, particularly those living in poorer countries. We raise questions such as, do they have enough resources for food and housing, or are they in a constant battle with hunger and poverty? Moreover, overpopulation poses a serious issue when the global resources are unevenly distributed. It is reported that developed countries, with less than 1/4 of the world's population, consume almost 80% of the world's resources. Take, for instance, an average person from the United States who uses 176 gallons of water per day, compared to someone from Africa who can only use 5 gallons a day or even less. With this, it can be seen how inequality is an undesirable effect of overpopulation. Furthermore, this also negatively impacts the environment because natural resources such as fresh water and fossil fuels are heavily exploited due to the competitive need of the booming population. The situation can only get worse when no interventions are done to decrease the exponential population rate. The Malthusian theory, coined by Reverend Thomas Malthus, argues that population growth and time have a direct relationship. Given this, as time progresses, the population will continue to increase as well. This process continues until, eventually, the Malthusian limit is reached and the general population will not be able to sustain themselves with the limited resources. This, in turn, leads to poverty and possibly even absolute deprivation, where scarcity of food, resources, and even opportunities become chronic. This is present in the Philippines setting because in 2018, the World Bank recorded 106.7 million people in the country. Though the statistics did not reach the projections of 107 million by the end of that year, the country is still regarded as being one of the most densely populated countries worldwide. This means that there is still a large population residing in the area, which may be dangerous, especially when population growth is not properly regulated. Additionally, in the same year, approximately 16.6% of the Filipinos were recorded as living below the poverty line, meaning that they are unable to acquire their most basic needs, given their current income. Given this, the life conditions of the lower income groups could only get worse because there is a greater risk of their resource deprivation. What more now, given that most things but our population have remained stagnant? In 2020, our country already reached 111 million people, and this may only continue to rise as a result of people coming home due to COVID-19. Critics have stated that the Malthusian theory may be disproven due to the fact that it did not consider the large impact of progress in the field of technology. However, in the context of the Philippines, hints of this theory may still apply because technology has still not yet been completely integrated into agriculture. Countries such as Vietnam and Thailand have been able to maximize their agricultural land area and increase productivity due to the use of technology. The Philippines still lags behind in this aspect because traditional farming methods are still largely practiced, such as the use of carabaos and mainly organic fertilizers. The group agrees with some of the criticism received by the Malthusian theory, such as the fact that the theory is grounded on a macro level, basing claims off levels of per capita income despite it not presenting its clear correlation to population growth rates. The group also recognizes that population growth in and of itself is not the only or even the main reason for living conditions in developing countries. However, Malthus still raises pretty good points, and there is still some truth to the theory, especially in the Philippines. Looking deeper into the effects of overpopulation, let's look into the employment aspect of it. As of 2018, more than 300,000 nurses remain unemployed, while there are 250,000 who are either underemployed or misemployed. This is a result of a mass expansion in education and training for health workers, leading to a mass supply of domestic workers who cannot be absorbed by the Philippine healthcare system. This leads to a paradox of underservice, especially in rural and remote areas, and at the same time, underemployment and outmigration. In addition to this, most nurses who work in local hospitals and communities are contractuals with no security of tenure. These nurses only earn around 250 pesos to 350 pesos a day, making it extremely difficult for them to sustain decent family living. But this isn't just a health-related issue. Underemployment, as mentioned, is when a qualified individual is unable to use their full skills due to the lack of available opportunities. In 2018, approximately 16.4% of employees in the country were underemployed, and this number has been steadily increasing over the past decade. Delving into the latter, many skilled workers opt to flee the country instead. This is where brain drain comes in. In simplest terms, brain drain is another term for external migration. A substantial number of workers move to other countries with better opportunities in order to seek a higher standard of living. According to the McKinsey Global Institute in 2016, this was one of the main problems that developing countries faced. Around 52% of the Filipino migrants that have moved to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD countries, have attained tertiary education. This means that despite their qualifications, they opted to external migrate instead, possibly due to the aforementioned factors. That's crazy. This phenomenon of losing human capital in the fields of business, management, education, medicine, science, and engineering can pose a threat to economic and social development in the Philippines, since the professionals the country loses are usually in their productive age. Still, the country still benefits from it as overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs, still rake in a significantly large amount of remittances every year. But migration does not only occur when a citizen opts to move to a different country, as it is also present internally. More often than not, rural to urban migration occurs where an individual residing in a rural area opts to move to an urban area in hopes of finding more opportunities. Given this, it is often stated that urbanization is the result of migration. What is urbanization exactly? In simplest terms, it refers to the process of a society changing to an urban way of life from a rural one. In the Philippines, with approximately half of its land area deemed agricultural land, this poses a threat to the country's limited resources. Its effects are already manifesting itself. From an estimated number of 30 million hectares devoted to agriculture, as of 2018, the number declined to only 13.32 million, which is over a 50% drop. This, as a result, has led to lower farm output and therefore less available resources. But how about overpopulation's negative impact on the Filipinos who stay in the country? To further understand this, we can look at the dependency ratio. In simple terms, this refers to the dependency of individuals of non-working ages, such as minors and senior citizens, on those who are of the working age. In the Philippines, the non-working age refers to infants until 19-year-olds and those above 65 years of age. On the other hand, the working age ranges from 20 years old to 64 years old. As of 2020, the country's total dependency ratio was 82.2, which signifies a high dependency ratio. This means that the majority of the Philippine population is composed of people who rely on someone else in the workforce to provide for them. When overpopulation continues to grow, this is associated with an increase in fertility rates. However, these newborns are unable to contribute to the economy for at least 18 years or until they become of working age. Due to this, there is a greater dependency ratio. This may lead to lower productivity because of the extra responsibilities of the labor force, which in turn serves as a hindrance to economic development. Singapore, however, is dealing with the other side of the coin, underpopulation. The group chose this country as it is also part of the Association of the Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN. given all the negative impacts of overpopulation that was mentioned earlier, we can easily assume that underpopulation is the lesser of two evils. However, Singapore would like to suggest otherwise. The country has been struggling with its population due to the increasing aging workforce and slow population growth. The country's fertility rate has been amongst the lowest in Asia. For the past few years, it has hovered at about 1.20, while the rate necessary for a sustainable population is 2.1. As a matter of fact, the situation has become a national issue, and it has reached the point where it results in economic problems, resource waste, and potentially demographic suicide. Let's take a look at each factor closer, shall we? First, underpopulation leads to an insufficient number of workers to cater to the growing industrial demand. There's obviously a need for a growing and reliable workforce in order for continuous economic growth. This poses as a disadvantage to the capitalist system because of the low percentage of consumers, and not to mention the significant decrease in the number of people paying taxes. Eventually, the country's high GDP could drastically plummet if this problem is not addressed. Second, natural resources are wasted because they are not used efficiently. The industrial sector would continue their high levels of population despite the fact that their population would only need a small fraction of the supply that was produced. Hence, there are too many resources for the population. Lastly, there is a possibility that this would lead to a demographic suicide. In 2015, the dependency ratio recorded was where one adult would have to support only one child or elderly person. However, by the year 2050, it is projected that in every 1,000 working adults, 95 children and senior citizens would rely on them for financial support. Through this, it can be observed that the age structures in Singapore is greatly uneven. This places a pressure on the Singaporean society as the economy struggles to assist the aging workforce. Who would look after and support the retired population in the future? Can the current birth rate of the country suffice the demand of the workforce in the future? With this, let's discuss possible concrete solutions that could lead to an ideal population level for all. For both countries, family planning is always one of the best options when it comes to controlling population density. This, of course, depends on the target size of each country. The government can provide subsidies and incentives as a way to encourage their citizens to either increase or decrease their family size. This can be executed through paid maternity leave from a maximum number of children, tax relief, and special priority in school administration. In connection, this also gives emphasis in enriching empowerment for women to get to choose how and what they want to do with their lives. This extends to providing them with quality education, which will pave the way for more educated and economically self-sufficient mothers. In a sense, childbearing would be controllable on a micro level, since women would be able to consider the opportunity cost in terms of how childbearing competes with income-generating activities. On the other hand, for countries whose overpopulation is considered as a problem, such as the Philippines, the direct goal should be to significantly limit the current rate of growth. This includes addressing underlying problems that contribute to rapid growth, such as poverty, income inequality, and unemployment. Another possible option is the one-child policy. This is widely regarded as a controversial intervention, as this policy limits families in the country to one child each as a means to reduce growth rate. In line with this, the promotion of birth control and family planning is emphasized. The group believes that this may lead to an advocacy of population stabilization, although it will require large-scale efforts like compulsory sterilization as a way to simply control a developing country's population and family size. On the flip side, underpopulation in the context of Singapore can be promptly addressed through opening the country's doors to immigrants. The economical need for a reliable workforce would be fulfilled by absorbing skilled foreign workers from neighboring countries such as Malaysia. This is a much faster and effective approach in rebalancing the population compared to just increasing the birth rate, which would take effect in a much later time. As you've seen, both overpopulation and underpopulation are undesirable. According to Robert Cassin, population growth should neither be exaggerated nor minimized. A balance must be created. At the end of the day, an ideal population level does not exist. Rather, we should focus on what is most practical for each country in order to encapsulate awareness and in-depth understanding, given its people, resources, institutions, and land area. All in all, the group believes that we must first take into account the country's wealth, in terms of land area and resources, in order to determine a practical population size for the Philippines. This is extremely important in ensuring that the country's resources are well distributed to the population. Housing 1 million people isn't really the problem. In fact, we already proven that we can take it more than we can handle. The real issue here is the quality of life given to the 111 million Filipinos. Too many people, too little space indeed. As aforementioned, family planning and women empowerment are general policy approaches that can reduce the country's annual population growth rate of 1.4%. With combined efforts from both government agencies and the civil society, we can overcome population. This is only our next step towards development.